But the single most important, I think, and certainly the single most interesting development in Southern pro-slavery thought was their eventual flirtation with socialism and communism. So beginning in the late 1840s and certainly up now through the 1850s, these Southern pro-slavery writers began to critique capitalism, particularly Northern capitalism, which they considered to be the true slavery, right? They considered white working class Northerners to be the true slaves, and and much more enslaved, they argued, than their own black slaves.
They argued it was good for their slaves, and they threw out the term, which has just gained popular awareness again, is wage slavery. Correct?
Exactly. And so I argue in the epilogue to the book that these pro-slavery writers were pre-Marxian Marxists. So if you read, for instance, some of the speeches of James Henry Hammond, governor of South Carolina, and his critique of Northern capitalism, you would think you were reading Karl Marx. Right?
And they call, by the way, they call these terms capitalism explicitly. It's not like we are importing these words and phraseology into their mouths. They were quite explicit about what they were talking about. Correct?
They were, and they were pre-Marxian Marxists. They were writing in Marxian language before Marx was writing about some of these concepts. And then the flip side of this is they eventually, at least some of these pro-slavery writers came to adopt the principle of socialism. And George Fitzhugh described the slave plantation, or he described the Southern plantation as, quote, the beau ideal of communism, close quote. Right? So he viewed the plantation as, and in fact, he said plantation socialism is better than European working class socialism.
Because everybody's paid for. Everybody has, you don't have to worry about losing a job or.
No, that's exactly the arguments that they made, right? They made the first arguments for the welfare state.
I was about to say that the connections to the welfare state is incredible here.
They make the argument relative to Northern workers. They make the argument that Southern slaves, they never have to worry about losing a job, right? They never have to worry about poverty. I mean, how they could say that is
so ridiculous.
Insane. Yeah. But the point being, they argued that plantation socialism is a system literally of cradle to grave welfareism.
And it seems like it wasn't just capitalism as such. It was more so an abstraction or a particular point subsumed under what George Fitzhugh called private judgment. Right, this fundamental thing called private judgment. What did Fitzhugh really mean by that, and why did he consider that as a bad thing?
Well, excellent question. Private judgment means that the individual is the primary unit of moral and political value. Private judgment means that individuals, not collectives, have rights. And rights are, the idea of rights is grounded in the idea that each individual has a mind of their own, which they have the free will to exercise, right? And of course, that's the last thing you want on a plantation, right? Is the idea that your slaves have free will and they have their own minds to determine how they want to live and what values they want to pursue in life. So at the deepest philosophic level, these pro-slavery Southerners they were going to the heart and soul of a free society's moral foundations.
Better than
which
even
is-
modern day conservatives. Interesting enough. But go
Yeah,
ahead. I'm sorry.
Or at least some kinds of modern conservatives.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of the great things. I mean, one of the extraordinary untold stories in American history, which of course the people at the New York Times will not tell.
No,
They
not
will
even
not
close.
tell. They will not tell the story of how pro-slavery Southerners were advocating against capitalism and for socialism.
Explicitly, I always express that in explicit terms. We're not putting words into their mouth. This is what they said. I wanted to draw on a little bit more